we'll do the live thing first. Like, hey everybody, welcome back to the Bigmark podcast. It's me, your host, Bigmark. If it's your first time watching or listening, welcome. If not, welcome back. Like I always say, if you ever wanted to reach out to the podcast in any way, let us know what topic you wanted to hear. Give us a comment, whatever you'd like to do. Reach out to us on our DMs, hit us up on our Instagram or our Twitter at the Bigmark Pod or at the Bigmark Podcast. If you ever wanted to donate to the podcast, check out our Patreon, patreon.com/the Bigmark Pod. If you can, and if you like the podcast, if you like what you hear, please share with your friends. We're always trying to grow the Bigmark podcast community and, bring people of like or even sometimes unlike minds together that maybe wouldn't necessarily think that they share the same interests. But again, if you can have that one little point of reference, it's always great to connect people. So, always want to grow the community that way. So share with your friends. Please rate the podcast if you get a chance wherever you're listening. And if you are watching on YouTube, like and subscribe to the channel and follow along so you know when the next videos are coming out. I do this every week on Wednesday, so tune in. We'll see you there. Thank you all for listening. Thanks to everyone who's come back. I'm really excited about today's episode because it's one of those episodes where I've always had it, kind of in the hopper. So an episode that I always wanted to do because it's a topic I always wanted to cover, I should say, because I really love this show. It's one of my favorite shows. And even I'm guilty sometimes of forgetting about just how great it is, or, maybe not necessarily name checking it as not only one of my favorite shows, but one of the all-time greatest shows. And that is Arrested Development. It's a tremendous show. If you've never seen it, it's an American sitcom created by Michael Hurwitz. It aired for 3 seasons from November 2003 to February 2006. It was actually later picked up by Netflix, and season 4 aired in 2013, and then season 5 aired in 2018 and 2019, like in 2 different parts. It's been absolutely critically acclaimed, 6 Primetime Emmys, a Golden Globe. It's been named one of the greatest shows of all time by the Rolling Stone, Time, Entertainment Weekly. It's influenced many other single camera comedy shows such as 30 Rock and Community. And, when you watch the show, you can really see how all those things really, how they did influence all those shows. And I'll get to this point later, but just because something's really critically acclaimed doesn't always necessarily mean it's going to be considered one of the greatest to every person. So, man, I don't even know how it actually started. I might have even technically dropped the first question, but in my one of the group chats with the boys, my boys Scott, Benny, and Schnur, we're trying to get after, or we've been talking about, who is the greatest basketball player of all time, because there is obviously that epic debate, Michael Jordan or LeBron James. And statistically speaking, I don't think that there's a question that it's LeBron James, and we're really lucky. I was talking to my boss at work today, was even saying, the fact that we're seeing some of the greatest players like Aaron Judge in baseball. You're seeing Messi in soccer. You're seeing obviously LeBron James break all these records, and we're seeing all these things happen in real life, in real time. And it's pretty cool to be alive at the same time. And I guess you look back, and I guess there's Wayne Gretzky and Michael Jordan would have been concurrent, along with all the other great athletes of all time. But again, kind of statistically speaking, it's really hard to argue that it's not LeBron James as the greatest of all time. But the other thing that begs to be, or that's hard to actually argue, I should say, is like who actually is the better player. Because I guess you could put them one-on-one against each other. Like it's always really hard to tell when they never actually played against each other. All kinds of different things like that. But so many people that do want to argue for Michael kind of do it on this like kind of feel, they saw him play and they understand how good he was. And again, I'm not denying, obviously, he's one of the greatest. And that's the problem. Maybe you can't ever say that there's a single greatest player of all time, because I feel like realistically, like if you took every player like in their prime and put them against each other, if he somehow had a magic machine to do that, you'd probably be really surprised at who actually ends up being the best. It might even be like Shaq or someone who just is dominant, or like fucking Wilt Chamberlain. Who knows how it can be done? Because then even at that point, different stipulations come. Like, it can't just be one-on-one all the time. A basketball player is not only measured by their individual skill, but how they actually play in a game too. So it's like how it's almost impossible to ever actually say this is the greatest of all time, period. Unless you're Scott Barker, but then it's LeBron James. Shout out Bark Show. But again, I think I'm not saying that this is the best show of all time, number one, but if you look at his stats and it only was on a couple seasons and it wasn't really around that long, like, for it to still be mentioned at, like I said, by Time and Rolling Stone and Entertainment Weekly to be on their list as the greatest of all time, like, it says so much about how great this show is. And if you've never seen it, please go see it. If you have seen it, I love you. Thanks for watching and enjoying this little trip down memory lane. But if you haven't watched, spoiler alert. The plot surrounds the Bluth family, a formerly wealthy family who continue to lead extravagant lives despite their new circumstances. Almost akin to Schitt's Creek a little bit. It's somewhat similar to that, but not quite exactly the same. In Schitt's Creek, they lose all their money, and then it's more realistic that they're actually broke, that they don't have access to any more money, where the Bluths seems that they like kind of stopped making money, and then they're just like slowly just chipping away at what's actually left in the family. And it's kind of all based on the patriarch of the family's, misdoings, with how he controlled the company. At the center of the show is Michael, played by Jason Bateman, who's the show's straight man and always strives to do the right thing. Jason Bateman does such a fucking tremendous job in this role. I mean, like, he's always such a great straight man to begin with, right? Like, he's just again, in any show that he plays the straight man, he is just fantastic. He is sadly a widowed father to his son George Michael, who's played by Michael Cera, and he's just, again, the whole part that the fact that he's widowed, and George Michael's mother has passed away, and he's kind of dealing with that, and he's pretty young when his mother passed, but now he's like starting to get older, like getting into his teens and everything. But him and his father are obviously very close, but there's always a conflict kind of going on with George Michael's character, I should say, in the fact that he also equally tries to strive to do the right thing like his dad, but is also somewhat conflicted in many ways. And, he's kind of seen, and I think what it kind of stems from is, there's times where Michael Bluth, George Michael's father, will say, family's the most important thing. We got to stick around and love our family. And then all of a sudden something happens with the family, and Michael's the first one to kind of want to leave. And again, being the straight man of the family, he seems the most responsible. So he kind of almost seems antithetical to the rest of the people, or at least like he's somewhat there's a contentious feeling with the rest of his family. So I think George Michael, perceives that, and it kind of turns around in this way where there's that kernel of doubt where, maybe his dad isn't 100% right, or maybe that he's not telling the 100% truth, and or can't see the 100% truth, because he too is a Bluth, and he has his flaws. George Michael also has a crush on his cousin, which is a kind of a funky, that's the thing, the widowed mother, the crush on the cousin. You look at this show and there's a couple undercurrents of strange and really almost offbeat aspects of the show kind of woven into the fabric, and that might have turned some people off, you know what I mean? If they really focused on certain things. Again, the having a crush on your cousin thing is obviously taboo. And again, some other stuff that wasn't really taboo, but I'll get into that later. Michael's father, like I mentioned before, the patriarch of the family, George Sr., played by Jeffrey Tambor, who is just fantastic. Just delivery is so money. He is deadpan. He is outrageous at some points. His physical comedy is there at the top. I don't know. Maybe he saw it as a role to, because, it wasn't that he was old, but, he started to age, and maybe he realized that maybe this is one of the last roles where we can really go for it. And of course there's stunt doubles and body doubles to help, but he's just fantastic in the show. He gets arrested. His character, George Sr., gets arrested in the first ep. And while he's in jail, he goes to considerable lengths to control his family from prison and make decisions. He's constantly trying to avoid justice in some way or another, even when he, gets let out on some kind of furlough or whatever. He's trying to escape, and literally by any means necessary. I think he at one point tries to escape by weather balloon, which is phenomenal. His wife, which is, this is such a great character. Michael's mother, Lucille, played by Jessica Walter, is just this ruthlessly manipulative, materialistic, hypercritical, she always gets on every single one of her family members, especially Buster. She's constantly drinking. But Jessica Walter is just such a brilliant actress, and she does such a great job with Lucille Bluth. Jessica Walter also was the voice of Archer's mother in the Archer series, if anyone has seen that as well. And she is just so great in that, and so catty. She just has such an again, brilliant delivery, which is it's such a great cast, and it continues on here. But the cast so far, I mean, Jeffrey Tambor and Jessica Walter, their chemistry is just fantastic. They just seem like such an old couple, and they just, again, like I said, if you haven't watched the show, you got to see it, because there's just something about it where you really just feel that chemistry, and you can see really two pro actors really just getting after it. Like I said, Lucille's constantly all over her family members, and mostly Buster Bluth, Byron Buster Bluth, played by Tony Hale. And Buster's character, he's one of those characters, or Tony Hale playing Buster, I should say. It's one of those instances where once you've played a certain character, you kind of become that character. At least to me, I've recognized him as Buster. Anytime I see him in something, the first thing I think of is Buster Bluth. I'm sure that goes for Michael Richards, who played Kramer in Seinfeld. Well, in fact, anyone who played anything in Seinfeld, Julia Louis-Dreyfus or Jason Alexander. Oh my God, I almost said Bateman. Sorry. even Jason Bateman in some cases. No, but Buster Bluth, Tony Hale's character, is just one of those guys that's just hard to shake. He just does such a good job and such a specific brand of weirdo that every time you see him, again, you kind of can't help but think of good old Buster Bluth, and he is, a mama's boy, just spaz, prone to panic attacks. He's overeducated, yet undereducated. He's gone to school for everything. He's the youngest of this highly wealthy family, so he's gone to school for everything, but still can't really seem to take care of himself. Michael has other siblings too. His older brother, George Oscar Bluth II, named after his father, but goes by the acronym Job, G-O-B, played by Will Arnett, is one of TV's great characters. I mean, he's not entirely original in playing the, kind of selfish, stuck up, desperately wanting attention and striving to achieve attention, yet falling short because just not skilled and just not prepared. I want to plant this seed now, and I'll talk about it a little bit more, but no, you know what? I'm going to just keep explaining to everyone here. They're kind of that person who will have the utmost confidence in what they're doing, but just absolutely miss the fucking boat. Very competitive with Michael, an unsuccessful magician, just that is so pathetic at some points, but God bless him. Michael's sister, his twin sister, Lindsay, played by Portia de Rossi, who's spoiled, materialistic, just as much as her mother, and jumping from cause to cause to kind of be the center of attention. And again, played by Portia de Rossi, and she does such a good job of that kind of disconnected, stuck up not young in the sense of like underage, like teenage or anything, or like very young, but just like irresponsible younger mother who just doesn't know what the fuck's going on in her own daughter's life because she's so focused on hers. Again, played by Portia de Rossi, and it's kind of one of those times where you see an actress or an actor playing a role where you're like, how much of this role is actually in you? I was saying the other day, I feel like Portia de Rossi has a certain type of personality to have to be, in a relationship with Ellen DeGeneres. So I feel like if you can do that for so long, that you got something brewing inside you, which again, all these Bluths, there's like something inherently sinister about them. And again, that's probably the writer's little jab on the rich or something like that. But she plays the character phenomenally, and she's married to Tobias Funke, played by David Cross, which again, one of those characters in the show that endlessly quotable, just hilariously funny, and physically, and just everybody has brilliant comedic timing. I don't know if it's also just editing and direction, but just David Cross's Tobias Funke is such a masterclass in just absolute buffoonery. He was a discredited psychiatrist turned actor. He referred to himself as a now-rapist, which is an analyst and a therapist, the first time ever. And if you ever see that written down, a now-rapist, it looks pretty rough. He's also a self-declared never nude, which is his little affliction, where he can never be naked, and he constantly wears jean shorts underneath everything, including when he showers. He's clearly gay, but doesn't know or won't admit it. There's times in the shows where they do talk about it a little bit more, especially in the newer seasons. But during the three maiden seasons, which I like to focus on, at least for today, it's kind of it's kind of a bit in the show that they keep calling back to, that Tobias just always is saying things that are like completely overtly homosexual, and again seems to be completely oblivious to it. Tobias and Lindsay's daughter, maybe, who was played by Alia Sawkat, is always seeking opportunity of some kind and always finding a way to somehow weirdly further her relationship with her cousin George Michael. And again, this is one point that I wanted to make earlier, but I stopped myself. If you look at it and you think about all this and remind yourself of some of the characters and how they are, you know, conniving and always trying to get up on one another. And I always think of it as the funny Succession. I think I mentioned in the Succession episode that Succession is just a serious Arrested Development. I think the same thing for this today, that again, every time I look back at it, you know, you have almost an exact match for every character on each show. The other thing that's actually really cool about the show, you know, say what you will about the plot and the characters and everything, that's awesome. The show's construction itself, you know, how it's actually built, what the meat and potatoes, the nuts and bolts of the show, you know, the handheld camera work where you see kind of like that jostly camera work, shuffling from back and forth to characters and stuff. It was a pioneer in that. No, not a lot of other shows were kind of doing it that way. Ron Howard as an executive producer, but also as the narrator of the show, and he just did such a good job. The way they use the narrator in Arrested Development is a really interesting way. Really drives the plot. He's almost like another character in the show. They use stock photos and historical footage, you know, to kind of, again, drive the plot, but show evidence of just like how long this family has just been going at it. And again, all these things put together just created this holistic approach of, wasn't quite documentary. It was obviously a sitcom, but it wasn't obviously a biopic or reality TV. And at the time it made sense. Obviously the numerous running gags, like I mentioned, Tobias's one-liners and everything, but you know, things like where one of George Michael's girlfriends, Anne, George Michael's dad, kept referring to as egg or her. He kind of kept forgetting her, and just, she was so plain and everything. Mae Whitman, she does an awesome job as Anne. Buster, just in general, in his absolute madness and everything that goes along with him, they always had a good way of kind of like nodding back to or giving homage to all those gags that they had gone through in the past. But like I said before, you know, they hit the mark on some things, like I said, with the handheld camera work or things like that, like where they were on point with the times, with the construction of the show. But, you know, they were obviously critically acclaimed, winning Emmys, a Golden Globe, all these things. They obviously did really well. But why did they get canceled after 3 years? Honestly, I don't really know. There's probably a million different reasons why. The people involved will probably know. But my theory is that it just came out at the wrong time. It was poor timing. 2003, you know, still relatively soon, especially in America, after 9/11. And after 9/11, things changed so much for people. It was so heavy in America for, like, you know, 2002, essentially the whole year, because it happened, you know, late 2001, late-ish anyway. And no one was really interested in fucking like too serious comedy. You know, everyone wanted like funny, you know, slapstick, just jokey. I don't want to have to think about anything because I'm too fucking tired from mourning this major loss in the country. And again, it was something that, it was so early in the internet days, but yet it was felt so globally that it didn't really matter what kind of it didn't matter how the information got transferred. It just did, whether it was through TV, again, through the early days of the internet. It was a global feeling of kind of doom and that anything can happen. And people just weren't ready for a show that on the surface was pretty dumb. Like, that's the thing about Arrested Development. On the absolute surface of everything, it's not that great, you know. Well, it's just plain. It's like every other show on the surface, but the subtleties and the multiple layers in the jokes and like I said, the callbacks and the running gags in the show, and again, the delivery of all the actors. Each and every actor does such a great job. Literally every person in the cast is such a phenomenal actor and just is perfect for their role and nails every bit of it. And again, I think it just wasn't a time, you know, it was a time of American Idol and just like people just wanted to be told what they wanted. They were so vulnerable. They're in a position that they didn't want to think about shit or delve deeper or look beyond the fact that George Michael's kissing his cousin. Oh, that's weird. Not the fact that it's just fucking funny as fuck because he's there. It's just so much conflict happening at all times in that whole show, you know, and they tried to revive it. Don't get me wrong. You know, the new seasons were an interesting attempt. But funny enough, I think it suffered the exact same fate it did when it first came out. When it came out again, people just weren't, people had forgot about the show, really. They didn't understand. And, maybe there's shows out there that en masse people will never understand, but to critics are some of the best shows of all time. Even look at wild shows like Twin Peaks and things like that, right? Like, cult classics, things like that. Why are they cult classics? Are they cult classics because just a few people get them? Or are those few people more intelligent than others for some reason? Not necessarily, like just because it's a niche film. But again, I think there is something to be said about some shows that, just have a little bit of a higher intellectual load, right? And some people, not even that the fact that they can't understand it, it's just that they're not necessarily interested in that. They don't want a show that challenges them or makes them think in a certain way that they don't want, which is fine. But sometimes people just don't want that. And I think Arrested Development came out at a time where people just weren't interested in looking deeper and thinking about, about wild shit. And there's like class discrepancies and all kinds of stuff that happened in that show, which again, people just probably, there was even a push after 2001. There was a big push of like working class and, Mike Rowe's Dirty Jobs was one of the biggest shows out there just because it was kind of like showing like the working American and just like, what it takes to kind of keep a country going is just working hard no matter what happens, even if there's a major event, as long as you keep on trucking, everything's going to be okay. Which is 100% true. And that's what happens when you suffer fucking big crises. You need a way to bounce back. And I think we're going to be living through a very similar time now, with COVID and everything. I don't think people will be afraid of intellectualizing things quite as much because, in fact, as much as some people kind of fell back into echo chambers talking about COVID, I feel like it was a time for reflection. It was a time for research and gathering information. If some people just got, like, even people that wouldn't necessarily find themselves searching out new information probably found themselves reading a little bit more, coming across different information. Maybe it wasn't perfect information. Maybe it was misinformation or disinformation, but it was something that they're out there trying to learn, because it's not about what information you learn. It's about learning how to intake ideas, examine them, explore an idea without accepting it. That's what it's all about. And I think that I hope that more and more people were able to do that in this time. So as we move out of it, yeah, maybe we will want a little bit more lighthearted kind of info, but not something that we can't peel back the layers on a little bit and kind of look into a little bit more and find, you know, some of the joy and the sadness and the joy. Like I said, there's always a ripple of something in between, you know. Like I said, as much as this is just like Succession, there's some parts in Succession that are fucking very funny. So like I said, you know, if you like both shows or if you've seen one or the other, you know, check it out. If you've just watched Succession, haven't watched Arrested, go check it out, and you'll probably connect the same dots. One of the biggest things too, you know, timing is everything. I think timing is everything for most things in pop culture, because you can take things out of context. Even like I said, the LeBron Jordan conversation, right? You can take things out of context and it's really hard to compare them through time. We can strive to understand some of the phenomena that happen in our lives presently, but rarely can we understand phenomena that has passed, especially in past times where we haven't even been alive. And you know, yeah, I was alive during Michael Jordan's prime, but I wasn't like actually watching the basketball and stuff. So things like that, where even, like I said, before I was born, all these different phenomena that have come through with everything, you know, it's something that, you know, with any show, with any movie that takes over in some ways, well, maybe it didn't really take over completely, but any show that is out there and is able to make it even to TV, you know, the show execs are taking a chance with it. You never know how it's going to go. And again, as much as this was critically acclaimed, as much as the people who were able to peel back the layers and look into it loved the show, just because everyone hated it doesn't necessarily mean it's not still one of the best shows of all time. But who knows, maybe you could have got more seasons, maybe you could have kept going, but it got canceled. And in some ways that maybe that even elevates it too. It's almost like, you know, having to be forced out on top in a certain way. So timing is everything, people. And it's a great show. You should go check it out. Arrested Development, man, love this show. Thank you all for watching. It was such a great episode. Again, you know, like I said, timing is everything. So whatever you're doing out there, keep fucking plugging away. You never know when your time's going to hit. Thank you all for listening. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, do all that good stuff. Like the video, and if you're watching on YouTube, please share with your friends wherever you're listening. Share with your friends. If you tell one friend, we can double the podcast overnight. If you wanted to donate to the podcast, check out our Patreon, patreon.com/thebigmarkpod. Hit us up on our DMs at the Bigmark Pod or at the Bigmark Podcast on our Instagram or Twitter. And yeah, keep getting out there. Keep doing your thing. Keep finding new shows, even if they're old ones. Watch Arrested Development. Tell your friends about it. Have fun. Keep on rocking in the free world, and doot. Peace.